Welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Now, as you are aware, while Bridge and I take a little breather from a full season of leadership episodes, we bring you guest gifts, which sometimes even include guests. And these wonderful guests tell us all about what's landed with them from the podcast, their favourite episodes, how those moments have supported their own leadership learning, and what they'd love to hear more of. So after our 2 weeks of ball dropping and solo intros by the two of us, I am back handing over the mic to another brilliant guest. This week, I'm joined by the wonderful Philip Gardner, a wonderful man who started out as my work colleague and quickly became a marvellous friend. We have both moved on from the working environment where we first met, and now he is a permanent fixture on my favourite people list. Today, he is joining me from a church vestry. I will leave him to explain and to also give a much more detailed introduction as to who is Philip Gardner. So here he is, and let's see where this conversation takes us. Philippe! Hello!
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Very good. Good to see you. It's been a long time.
It has a bit. And are you looking forward to this?
I am. Do you know what? I'm a bit nervous, if I'm honest, because I've listened to a lot of your episodes with your guest speakers, and they always have something so intelligent and insightful to say. And I now feel the pressure to do the same, or at the very least be somewhat coherent. So yeah.
Well, and of course I have to make an apology, because although, as I say, you're on my favourite people list, I know that you are bereft that the Bridget is not here, because I know I got sort of like swept aside at a party over the summer when it's where's Bridget, I need to meet her. So I'm sorry she's not here, but you're just going to have to put up with me.
Well, I get a bit starstruck, really, because you're a familiar voice, and I've taken you to many places, the gym, the car, and I love that. But Bridge, I didn't know from Adam when I started listening, and then obviously when I met her, I was like, oh, I'm a bit in awe.
Here she is.
Yeah, it was like meeting a member of the cast of The Archers.
Yeah, you see, I told you Bridget looked older than me, so there we go. Aha!
No comment.
She's gonna love that, I don't think. So here we are. Yes, you have indeed. I mean, I have laughed about some of our texts when you've said, "Oh, you've been in the kitchen." I'm not sure if I've been in the shower with you yet, but there has been the car, the kitchen, whilst you've been travelling around on the train, I think. So yes. All to the good. As I say, it was quite spurious when somebody said that I'd been in the shower with them. I thought that was slightly odd, but there we go.
You've done a lot of ironing with me as well.
Oh,
done a lot of ironing.
I do hate a bit of ironing, I have to say. Ash should tell you that as well. So in which case, I was about to jump ahead far too far, because what we haven't done yet is hear from you as to who is Philip Gardner and why are you in a church vestry.
Yeah, well, I'll try not to deviate too much, but yeah, this is, you hear a lot of your guests say this, but it's true. This is a very difficult one. It's not necessarily difficult in terms of, not your job role is kind of the brief, because that's easy for me because I haven't got one at the moment. So that's very easy. But yeah, I sort of thought I'd take a bit of the leadership stance. So I'm an ISFJ, for anyone that speaks that language. I'm a green-blue, red-yellow in that order, if we really want to get down to it. I'm a friend, a son, a partner. I'm a member of a community where I live, and I'm in a job transition at the moment. So yeah, lots going on.
And how is the job transitioning going? How are you finding it? Because whilst we don't do job titling, your life has been hospitality, hasn't it? And the commercial arena. So how has it been?
Really liberating so far, really liberating. But I'm definitely in the transition phase, because I decided quite a while ago that I wanted to make a change from hospitality. In fact, I was thinking about it before I took my last job, the job that we met when
Yeah.
I was doing that. But I sort of felt that, okay, I've probably got one more big job in me, and I've built a career in hospitality. I kind of want to wring every drop out of it. So hence did the job that we met during. And it was, I suppose, during that time and COVID and a marriage breakup and lots of life events that really helped me kind of hone what it was that I specifically wanted to do. I kind of knew the direction and sort of territory. So I am currently studying to become an independent financial advisor, financial planner. Something that's, I'm really passionate about, really interested in. And, I love helping other people, and, I just want to do something in that space. So, yeah, so really interesting. I suppose I'm having to do all of the exams at the moment and going back to studying, which is a bit of a rude awakening after not having done a proper exam for best part of 30 years. So, yeah, so that's all new, and a couple more exams to go, and then I need to actually find some work.
I've always thought of you, though, since I've met you, as incredibly disciplined to my thoroughly wayward self. And, you were structured. So I'm sort of like imagining the whole going back to learning and what have you has actually been okay, because your self-discipline is pretty good.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've probably surprised myself in that I've not been too rigid around a routine, i.e., I get up and I study from 8 till 9:30, and then I have a break, and then I study again, and then I go to the gym. It's kind of quite fluid, but actually I've really enjoyed that. And part of not doing paid work is probably relishing in that a little bit, because I know that won't last forever. So
no, and having that fluidity.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of what you're doing, I mean, this is what I found since I went my own course as well, that there is the fluidity, so that you can try to packet things in the way that you actually want them to suit yourself. I mean, that's one of the challenges, I think, to actually create that balance, because otherwise you're just back to the rat racy feeling of the same dullard meetings in again and again, and that sort of like traction to it, which I am thoroughly enjoying not doing.
Yeah.
And I think you'll probably find
losing the feeling of the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Which is
absolutely.
Yeah. Although I have to say, it's very evident that I'm probably better when I've got a routine. I get more done, I'm more productive. That whole thing about, if you need something doing, ask a busy person.
Yeah, absolutely. See, well, you probably have already heard the episode with the Pomodoro technique in, because that's where you'll actually come to that.
Yes.
But anyway, I shouldn't be feeding you episodes, because this is you being allowed to say which episodes have hit you the most. So here we are. Well, I'm again running ahead, because I think you may well have said a little bit about this already, but what actually made you start, other than me texting you and saying you have to listen to this?
Well, if I'm completely honest, what really made me start was you. I mean, you were on it, and you said, I'm doing a podcast, and I was like, great, I'll give that a listen. I mean, obviously I thought it would be brilliant, but yeah, it was. And please don't be freaked out when I say this, but I just loved the fact that, I mean, I love podcasts anyway, but I loved the fact that I was listening to a familiar voice. It was just something really comforting. I mean, I listen to loads of radio and loads of podcasts, and I find it very comforting anyway. But to have a familiar voice was even better.
In a way. Again.
Exactly. It's just like being back working with you, Bobby.
Exactly. So because you've listened to so many, has it been tricky to decide which your favourites are?
Yeah, really difficult, because in fact it's quite an extensive back catalogue now, isn't it?
It sure is.
And I had to go back and remind myself. I mean, you and Bridge did the episodes that were reflecting on previous episodes, so you did a small intro and then sort of repeated the episode. That was really good, because I mean, to be honest, the original episodes were such a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, really difficult. And even, although I've sort of noted down a couple, but even from the conversation just a minute ago, the one about, which I hadn't written down, was about procrastination, which I loved. I loved that. Because we can all, however disciplined we are, we can all procrastinate, and we do it in different ways for different reasons. It's really interesting.
It's funny. I was at a networking event this morning, in fact, and we were talking about sort of like those self-stuckness bits, you know, where you're stopping yourselves from getting on with things and think, oh, I'll just go and do that over there, and all the reasons why. But the ones that we were concentrating on this morning were very much about fear and not wanting to start because just not sure, or your inner critic is sort of like eating you alive because you haven't tried to do some things. So it's interesting because we were then talking about self-leadership as a result, and the 5 things that come up from that, and one of those is about holding yourself, your intrinsic motivation, and holding yourselves accountable, and actually speaking things out loud. So I think, you know, when I think, and there's a whole host of other things there as well, but I think that I've loved, before you've even started doing the exams, you were really clear about what you wanted to do when you left hospitality, and speaking it out. It's actually now manifesting itself, not just because of the exams, but it just struck me again this morning, knowing that I was going to talk to you this afternoon, that's exactly what you've been up to. So and I think that when you can do that, that sort of like limits the procrastination element to it. If you can have that level of self-belief that I know that you've got around this, and that's just promoting him a bit more, because if you're going to need a financial advisor, this is the man. Here, you heard it here first, so that's good. So come on then, which ones did you pick?
So I couldn't just pick one, sorry.
That's fine.
So I picked the EQ one.
Okay.
And I probably not really thought about it, but the whole idea that EQ can actually be used in a negative way, you know, around manipulation. I suppose we'd call it, adaptive influencing, wouldn't we? But, you know, manipulation. And this whole concept that EQ isn't necessarily good versus bad. You know, it's not good that you've got EQ versus bad that you haven't, type of thing. It's, you know, there are people that don't have necessarily levels of EQ. Doesn't make them bad people. And I think that's really, it just really made me think very differently about it, because I think we all hold up EQ as, you know, or if you've got EQ, then, you know, you're sorted and it's a good thing. So
yeah, and because if you look at those lists that they always do about what are the top 10 leadership qualities that you now, and EQ is coming up on there, as is empathy and all of those sort of like elements to it, and not everybody leads like that. But it's the facing into strengths or whatever it might be. And in fact, I think people who have got quite high EQ can be more supportive to those that haven't.
Yeah.
And I'm not, just in case our boss is listening to this, I'm not referring to him when I say this, because I think he did have quite high EQ. I was going to say IQ then, EQ and IQ. But I have worked for other bosses who haven't, and I've almost been like their support mechanism, you know, that because I've gone, it would be great if you spoke to so and so about X, or it'd be really good if you came and you spoke to this group about Y, or whatever it might be, that they wouldn't necessarily think of for themselves. But that's where you need, again, we're back to situational, but where you've got different people around you who are playing on their strengths as long to allow you to play on yours.
Yeah, I once had a boss, again, not, you know, for avoidance of doubt, not our boss. Yeah. It's like that. I've got a friend, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I once had a fantastic boss, and he would be the first to say he didn't have, certainly not obviously, high EQ, but what he had. So therefore, I'm kind of maybe going to contradict myself, but what he had was, he was very, very intelligent, and he had the IQ to realise he didn't have the EQ, and he just had lots of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I guess that is EQ, isn't it? It's having self-awareness. It's knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and what your triggers are. And
I think it feeds into, which, you know, here we are sort of like mixing up the episodes now, but that whole element about introvert and extrovert, because I would say about the boss that I'm thinking about, again, similar to yours, incredibly high IQ, incredibly high level of self-awareness, but from an introvert extrovert, or where they gained their energy from, people tired them. So their self-awareness and their emotional quotient was for themselves, not for others. And so he would say, I don't like people. That's why I've actually recruited you, because I don't do... Did he say I don't like people? No, he did actually on more than one occasion. But he always used to... But he would say, I don't do the people stuff. That's for you to do. And I'm like, okay, but there are going to be occasions where you have to.
Yeah.
Where I can't do it for you. But I will try to cater for that so that you don't have to expend energy that I know that you don't have for that. He would find meetings wearing, just tiring, like, oh, I've had to be with 6 people for 2 hours. I'm exhausted. I need to go and lie down.
Yeah.
And I think some people are like that, whereas I get all of my energy from being around others.
Yeah, I'm a weird mix, actually, because although I'm an ISFJ, so I am an I, I'm quite close on the spectrum. I'm sort of not too far away from an E. And yeah, I sometimes can be exhausted by it, but sometimes I can be really energized by it. Just got a bit of a split personality like that.
That's the ambiverts that we're actually
ambiverts, yeah, and that was being a sparkling introvert.
Being a sparkling introvert.
Yeah, which I thought was an interesting one, because I hadn't re-listened to that one, but when I was looking back through the episodes, I remember that, and I think as an introvert, or somebody that's labelled as an introvert, but no, I mean, nothing's binary, is it? You have these labels because it just helps to kind of organise things, but you know.
No, that was the lovely Michelle Hartley, who, when I first met her and I messaged her and said, I'm not being judgy here, I just want to ask a question. I said, because whilst you are incredibly colourful, sparkly, I used the word sparkly, she's a very sparkly human being, but I watched her and I thought, oh, she has to take her energy away sometimes. And so I said to her, I'm just wondering if you are quite introvert and being what's needed, because she does so much for a really wide HR network. And she went, oh, you've caught me. And so I was just like, there we go. But yeah, so she was great to talk to because of this way that she can be and how she actually generates her energy. But she needs that quiet time, and I think that's what you're saying for yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd like to say I was an ambivert. I'm definitely not. I think I'm just either full energy or I've worn myself out and I need to go and lie down in a darkened room somewhere, which is usually quite pleasing for everybody else. Warm myself out. So with the EQ stuff, did you, with what you were learning, did you use it anywhere?
Yeah.
Did you think about it with other people? I just wonder.
It really resonated. It really resonated, and I thought about the people that I would in my life, either that I, sort of in my past more, or people now that I probably would say, oh yeah, they're really high EQ, or they're not. They're what you'd label as perhaps lower EQ, and it really helped me reframe them in terms of, the fact that this isn't a good and bad sort of binary thing. This is something that it's kind of two sides of the same coin. In that, actually, just because you've got EQ, it doesn't make you a better person.
No, how you integrate with others in terms of where you pitch yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So you said you had 2.
I had 2, yeah. So the other one, this was a bit of a force myself out of my comfort zone, because I tend to gravitate to your episodes that are around leadership styles, the fact that I think now, my personality type, don't want to keep harking back to Myers-Briggs, but, ISFJ, I'm very green, they're not, certainly 20 years ago, what you would say are sort of typical leadership qualities. It was all very red and extrovert and, that type of stuff. So I've really enjoyed when you've talked about leadership coming from all directions, all types of people. So that tends to be where I gravitate. So the one that was a bit different and sort of pushed me a little bit more out of my comfort zone was about being an intentional networker. Because I'm also very aware that I need to do more of that if I'm going to establish and grow a business and be self-employed and generate some work. I need to do that in whatever form that looks like. And I think nowadays it's not about signing up for an event and having to walk around with a glass of wine and juggle some canapes and make sure you don't end up talking to the same person all evening just because you enjoy talking to them. But how do you do it? What are the different ways, some of the techniques? And I think ultimately just taking away from that episode that if you think about it like you're just building a relationship, don't think too much about it, basically. Don't be too intentional almost. I think that was a helpful episode, and I think one that I'll revisit as I get further into my new world.
Because if we think for a minute about, I'm desperately, because I don't use Myers-Briggs very often, so the FJ. So it's an introvert, sensing, feeling, and judging. So in a rounded way, what does that sort of like say in terms of your type?
So I guess I'm quite attuned to other people.
Yeah.
As in, again, I don't want to go down this route of, EQ is good and etc.
No.
Because there are massive pitfalls to that. As you've probably experienced when you worked with me, you'd often have to talk me down from certain situations. What was the quote that I loved? Something about when you're not in a place of being self-righteous, then that might be the time to tackle this conversation. When you were giving me advice about tackling something with somebody.
Well, that sounds such a coaching trait of mine, I don't think. Jesus.
Sorry, I've just thrown that completely out of context. That's probably very unfair, but it was very good advice, can I just say?
I think it was a tad pointed, but I think it did the trick.
It did the trick, yeah. I sat on it for a while.
You did laugh eventually.
I did.
But I think, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about the colours as well, that green blue is very much the detailed sort of like element to you, which I know and love about you, thank God, because come to you every time I needed something from a spreadsheet that I didn't know how to do. But the green as well is that sort of like developmental growth element to it. And it takes a while for you to go red.
Yes.
But
yes.
Bleeding hell, when you do, then I'm like, okay, no, that's probably the moment that this isn't the moment to do it.
Yeah, I kind of go from naught to red quite quickly when pushed, but I suppose
I think all of that said, that attuned to people where you actually sit in all of that, I can understand why networking would seem incredibly painful, but because it's not all of that bloody awful glad handing with canapes anymore, there's so much that goes on social media. I mean, that was one of the things that I was encouraging you to start looking at Instagram and everything else besides, because you can make a whole load of different linkages in that way using technology. And it was funny, again, this networking event I went to this morning, I wandered in and it was just light touch, coffee, us having a conversation and doing some work together. But I went, oh, hello, and went across and gave this lady a hug, and then realised I'd never met her in real life. But all the stuff that we had actually been involved in together, COVID has allowed for that you build really strong relationships in very different ways with people, which doesn't require all of that really horrible, uncomfortable sort of networking of old.
Absolutely. And I've done so many networking events in my hotel hospitality life, but I didn't enjoy. I really didn't. I was okay at it. I did it. I don't think I was bad at it, but certainly didn't enjoy it. But then I think the sort of part of the realization is I don't think anyone really does particularly, or certainly don't think they're good at it. So
no, and I mean, I just all of those stereotypical types of like the people running around handing their business card out to everybody and sort of like element. But in the past, I would be quite selective, but also, especially with these things now, or conferences or whatever you may well have to go and do, is checking, because there's so much media stuff now, and so that you can find people and go, oh, I definitely want to talk to them. I'm going to go and find them, or make the connection beforehand to say, I'm really interested, having looked at your LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. I really hope that, we can catch up whilst we're actually there. So you're almost sort of like making your plan. And I think I've done that a long time in networking, because I just couldn't bear the lack of control around it. Or I think I might have said on the episode, these massive networking events that I used to go to on cruise ships, which were just awful.
Yeah.
Because you'd eventually find that there was somebody that was like a stalker that you really didn't want to see, and then because you couldn't get off the boat, there was one year I nearly threw myself overboard because I was like, oh God, not again! I don't want to talk about call centres. No. So
yeah, that was actually
horrific.
really good advice when you said it, and I think it was that particular example that you said about doing the preparation and being very deliberate about who you talk to.
Yeah.
You just never want to, but you equally don't really ever want to be that person that appears to be the one that is kind of, maybe this is again back to the sort of type of person I am, but I think yours the same. You don't want to be seen to be the, oh, I'm not going to talk to them because they're of no use to me, or I'm really going to work the room for these people. So it's just doing it in a subtle way that works for you, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But the other thing to do is to take them with you. Say, come with me. I'm just about to go and talk to so-and-so. You might find that interesting as well. And then shut them out.
Yeah.
No, but to make sure that you, I mean, it's like the thing, you can be still kind, can't you? But not finding that at the end of the event you've been so flipping kind, you haven't got anything that you've actually needed out of it.
Yeah, and you've ended up having your ear chewed off by the same person all evening.
That'd be you if you're not careful.
I know. It's something I've really got to hone. Okay. I'll brilliant.
Just like, right, shut up, go away. Philip needs to go and talk to this person over here. Won't do that. I'm not that mean.
That's good. You're good at hosting parties, you see. You're used to it.
I do like a party. Well, but as we know, I do like a party.
Exactly.
So what haven't we tackled that you would like us to do an episode on?
You sort of tackle things in under certain headings. So I suppose it's whether you tackle it sort of vertically or horizontally. I mean, I was thinking about, you talk loads about self-awareness and personality profiling. I don't know if there's kind of mileage in sort of episodes that really kind of focus in on, personality profiling type, and pick a particular sort of method of personality profiling, or pick a particular element of self-awareness. Because I find that really, really interesting. It's kind of, I think it's reassuring more than anything. It kind of reassures you that actually everyone's thinking in fairly similar ways, and the insecurities and doubts that you have are very similar to others. Yeah. So I think something in that space might be good. Mm-hmm. And then I also thought in my kind of new world, is there anything around sort of financial leadership, purpose? Ultimately, your financial world can feel quite transactional for obvious reasons, but actually it does ladder up to a higher purpose in terms of what are you doing with your life, what do you want it to look like, how do you structure not just your career and leadership, but your life generally, and having a plan and being intentional can make or break that.
Oh, I like that. Well, we'll have to wait until you're qualified, and then you can come back and do that episode for us.
Yeah, at least it'll be regulated then.
At least we'll be legal. That would be good.
Yeah.
But funny you should say about the self-awareness element, because I haven't even discussed this with Bridget. Bridget, you've heard it here first now. Sorry, love. This next season that we've got coming up in mid-May, I keep coming back to, when I've sort of like been looking at the prep for particular episodes, going, there's some really good self-reflection questions. as a result of having heard the episode. That, I don't know, we're doing quite a few episodes in different areas about change and psychological safety and things like that. There's a whole range of things that we've put together for this next season. But actually having a set of like reflection questions afterwards may well be the things to help people with the self-awareness. So rather than it actually being the episode, that you are able to build your self-awareness by perhaps just having listened to it and then mulling over what you've heard with these questions in front of you at the end.
That's a really good idea.
So I'm playing with that at the moment. And as I say, I hadn't told Bridget, but I now have, and it's your fault. So if she's cross with me, I'm going to say, well, it was Philip. It was because of what he said. But I thought that might help. But I like that, because that will then support the particular elements of self-awareness, if that makes sense. But I do like the personality profiling, and what we'd have to do is think about whether that's just one or two, or whether we've got a few people on there to talk about the different ones.
Yeah, and how it plays out, and sometimes also the pitfalls of it as well. You know, like I say, you have to be, with personality profiling, it almost has to be quite binary. But, you know, equally there can be misconceptions that, you know, go along with that. But back to the EQ piece, really. And
I think that all the ones that I know of, qualified in, or whatever it might be, there's never only one answer. Because, I mean, I look at some and go, okay, so here's my score here, or here's where I normally sit. So that's like your preferred way of being. But that doesn't mean that a situation doesn't arise. It's a bit like we said about you, green, blue, but Jesus, when you decide to go red, it becomes nuclear. So it's not that you can't, it's not the thing that you lead with. So I often start with the personality profiling, is that wherever you actually land, it's your preferred style, but that doesn't mean that as a result of the situation or the people that you're with or the job that you're in, that it may well be that you find that you become a lesser number or a lesser version or a more enhanced element to it. But where you naturally land is here. And there's those that you get where it says, this is what you're like in a work environment, and then this is what you're like in a home environment. And what I'm always looking for as an integral coach is that they're not two separate things, because somebody is masquerading somewhere. They're not being their true self because they feel that they need to be something different because of where they actually are.
Yeah, and that's a tricky balance to keep, because I think that thankfully the modern workplace on the whole is much more open to, you know, bringing your real self to work and all of that. But equally, you have to sometimes tone it down if you want to stay employed, don't you? So you've got to kind of, you've got to temper it. But you know, that's a bit of a tightrope to walk, because you know, it also depends on who you're with and what's acceptable in that environment, and
absolutely,
you know, all sorts.
Because I remember when I left the army and being in a corporate world, which I really wasn't used to, and thinking I got to be a particular type of person and wear a suit and all of that. And I thought, I just don't feel like me at all. And such a level of performativity about who I thought I'd got to be. It was exhausting. I mean, it nearly sort of like tipped me over the edge, you know, until I then thought, well, now I need to be much more of me. And that was when I then had to be careful about keeping a job. So yes, thank you for reminding me to temper myself every now and again, Philip. Doesn't always happen, but we can but hope. Now, believe it or not, I kind of hardly believe it, we're nearly coming to the end.
Goodness.
This is a nightmare. But tell me a couple more questions. So tell me about who you are going to say, right, one, you have to come and listen to me because I've now been on a podcast, and two, who you would be encouraging to listen to the episodes. Who are you steering towards coming and being a avid listener of More Than a Lumpy Jumper?
Well, I do. I like to think I do evangelise about your podcast. Excellent. To whoever will listen. I've even made my other half listen to it in the car. So,
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
No, don't apologise to me. I love it. I was always telling people at work, because obviously you left before I did, that have you heard Bobby's podcast? Have you heard Bobby's podcast? So I think I need to give Sarah Harvey another nudge. I mean, she might listen. I don't know. She may be still an avid listener. I know she has listened to it, but I shall be telling her that I'm on it. I think I might tell my mum. That would be nice, wouldn't it? She'd like to listen to
don't-
me on a podcast, I'm sure.
I know, but well, I'm very glad we haven't sworn then. So that's good. Hello, Mum. This is all good. God.
And then I think my good friend, my long-standing good friend that I met in the hotel business 25 years ago, Katie O'Hara, she's a director of sales for her hotel management company. She loves a podcast. And we have the same taste in people and things generally. So I'm going to recommend it to her. She does a lot of driving as well, commuting, etc. So
excellent. Well,
love
nice
a podcast for a commute.
Yes, nice to meet you, Katie, and I hope that this is the start of a connection. That'd be lovely.
You never know, she might be a guest in future.
Oh, well, that would be even better. Even better. Okay, so I don't think I actually sent you this question, but I'm going to ask it because you probably have heard other people being asked it. That question where people say, oh, what would you have your older self tell your younger self? Well, we turn it on its head. So what would young little Philip running around in his short trousers be reminding grown-up Philip in this job transition about life?
Probably something along the lines of not sweating the small stuff. Yeah. I think there's still a tendency, a danger to forget the bigger things in life, the more important things. And that, again, that's a really tricky balance, isn't it? Because you have to sometimes care about the small things to make the big things happen. But, I think it doesn't hurt to remind ourselves of that at times.
So every now and then just make sure that, well, I think you do space for fun. I know that you travel a lot and are having fun. And I love the fact that in your intro, you reminded me just what a community person that you actually are. I've always loved when I've talked to you about how integral you are to the village and where you live. And now here you are doing work for the local church. I get it back in there eventually. But that whole element, I mean, that is Philip Gardner. That whole element to you. And it may well have come from being a small boy in a community or whatever it might be, but that's the thing that, to be ourselves, it takes a village, doesn't it? But you're living proof of how that works.
Yeah. I've always sort of tried to live by the thing that whatever you achieve in life, whatever you do, whatever you accomplish, you want people to stand at your funeral and think, oh, he was a nice old boy, he was a nice man. And I think we all want that, don't we, really?
Yeah.
But you just have to remember yourself in the meantime and
absolutely
not
at the expense of self.
Exactly. And I think that you address a lot of that in these podcasts, which is great to hear, and great to hear other people's reflections and struggles with that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can assure you, although you're so much younger than me, that you'll probably have been at mine before yours, but people will be saying what a genuinely lovely person you actually are. And as I've said, you are on my favourite people list, and I am very, very grateful for you having taken the time to come and record with me today, because it's been lovely.
Thank you, Bobby. Likewise. I'm a card-holding member of your fan club, so Ambridge. So delighted, and I hope it's a good episode.
It is. It's been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much, Philip.
Thank you.
I'll speak to you soon. Thanks for listening. Any resources mentioned in today's episode can be found on Spotify or over on our website, so you can read, listen, watch and explore in your own time whenever you fancy diving a little deeper. We'll be back soon for Season 6. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe on your platform of choice so you never miss an episode. And if you've been loving what we do here, tap those 5 stars and leave us a review. It's the best way to help others find the show too. So keep your ears peeled for Season 6 for our dulcet tones in May.